Welcome to Viewpoints with Brenda. I'm your host, Brenda Natamba, and on this podcast, you'll hear plenty of conversations with African professionals, change makers, innovators, influencers, and entrepreneurs from all sectors. Uganda and Tanzania recently signed the host agreement, the shareholders agreement, and the tariff agreement for the East African crude oil pipeline. The significance of this development in Uganda's race to fast oil cannot be emphasized enough, as this is a moment that many Ugandans have been waiting for almost 2 decades. Joining me today to discuss this historic development are industry experts Pamela Natamba and Tony Otoa. Pamela Natamba is a tax partner at PricewaterhouseCoopers, where she heads up the oil and gas practice. She has provided tax advisory services to a number of multinational clients in Uganda and the United Kingdom in a broad range of industries. Pamela is also a member of the Uganda Chamber of Mines and Petroleum, where she chairs the tax committee. Pamela is also the only female partner and the first female partner at PwC Uganda. Tony Otoa is the chief executive at Stanbic Business Incubator Ltd. Tony is in charge of delivering Stanbic Bank Uganda's enterprise development agenda, creating market opportunity for its business customers. Prior to joining Stanbic, Tony was the national content manager at Total E&P. He has also worked with Oxfam, Monitor Publications, and the Advocates Coalition for Development and Environment. My first question for you both is, why has it taken so long for Uganda to get to this point?
Okay, maybe I will start, Brenda. Let's just imagine you're building a house. You will go look out for a plot of land and look out for a suitable plot of land and think, yeah, this is where my house should be. And then what happens is you go into a planning phase. The planning phase will mean you're looking at your BOQs, your planning, your blueprints and everything. And then immediately after that, you get into the construction phase. Now, for Uganda, this has taken a long time, and that is true. But when you think about it in the sense of preparedness, but also in the sense of getting our country ready for this new situation that we have never seen before, I would say this hasn't actually taken a long time. This has in fact been a short time. Think about it this way. We as a country have managed to put together a legal framework which can guide the sector, all the way from your policies, your laws, and all of these areas or things that we believe are important for us to get the sector up and running. Many African countries did not have the privilege or have never had the privilege of setting those standards and legal frameworks before they begin exploiting the oil situation. So I think for me, I wouldn't say it's a long time of waiting. I think it has just been a great time for preparation, a time that the companies and the government and other stakeholders have been engaging to try and get the best value out of this situation.
Maybe I'll just add to what Tony has said. If you think about some of the developments and the statements that we've been receiving from different representatives from the government, yes, there's the factor of making sure that we are prepared, making sure that the right institutions are in place, making sure that the right policies, laws, legislation, framework are all in place. But there is also the factor of the nature of the oil that we discovered. We've been told a number of times that, our oil is waxy, it solidifies at room temperature. It needs to be, heated up, for example, when being transported. So all these considerations have a financial implication. And a country like Uganda, we all know where we are from a financial perspective. You don't rush to start an investment unless you know that you have ticked all the boxes. So I guess it was also important for us to make sure that we are well prepared from that perspective. We have investors who are prepared to be part of the journey so that we can be successful eventually.
So in light of this, what are your views on the readiness of the current government players in Uganda?
There are different players, yes, and you're right. We've got the government itself, supported by the Ministry of Energy and Mineral Development. You've got the Petroleum Authority at the forefront, got the Petroleum Directorate, which is responsible for the regulatory framework. And then you have UNOC on the other hand, which is the Ugandan National Oil Company, which takes care of the financial interests of the government. So that's on the one hand. Then you have the likes of NEMA. We need to make sure that we are doing things right from an environmental perspective. You have the likes of the Uganda Revenue Authority, who have to make sure that these revenues are being taxed appropriately and we are collecting the right taxes. So if I just think about the preparation that the Ministry of Energy has gone through, the work that we have seen the Petroleum Authority doing, it's one authority that has really prepared itself from the perspective of resourcing, one, human capital, having the right people in there to be able to lead this institution, because it plays a very critical role, being the regulation of the petroleum sector, for them to be able to create a lasting value for Ugandans, and also for them to be able to have sound investment, like attract investors and market Uganda as a sound investment destination. So with that role in mind, what they have done, in my view, is commendable, because their institution has been set up with proper corporate governance. They have the right leadership. They have structured themselves in such a way that they are able to reach out to the masses. They've been sensitizing the public. It's been over 2 years or even longer than that of sensitization. This is in Kampala. It's in the oil region in Hoima. So they've done quite a bit from that perspective, but also other initiatives like getting Ugandans to start preparing themselves to be part of this, the National Supplier Database, which I'm very sure Tony will at some point talk about, helping Ugandans register so that they can then prepare themselves to participate in the sector. They have not just focused on Ugandan companies, but they are also looking at helping individuals in the employment space. How do we become employable? There is a national talent register for those that are seeking to participate in the sector through employment. So I do really think that, for example, the Petroleum Authority has done significant investment in making themselves ready. If I think about the URA, they did set up a full-fledged team for the oil and gas. I think that was about 5 or 6 years ago, when there was a lot of activity happening in the sector. Of course, this team had to be redeployed at the time when it was a bit silent in the sector. But now, with us seeing FID close, then I expect that they will redeploy those people in the oil and gas sector. So there has been significant investment, in my view. That said, we cannot be prepared enough. The sensitization has to continue. The investment has to continue from all stakeholders, so that we continue to ensure that Ugandans do not miss out on this opportunity.
Let's remember one thing. If we had jumped into this oil and gas story and just began production or got into development, say in 2010, we would have had a situation where, one, you don't have many Ugandans in these institutions that are prepared. But we've managed to have them, go and get experience, go get trained, go get educated, and really understand the sector. And now we built a huge army of young people who understand the sector, not just from the Ugandan point of view, but with an international outlook. And this, for me, is a bonus in the sense that we are better prepared than what would have been the case 10 years ago or 5 years ago.
I have had a look at Uganda's local content policies, and it is quite commendable. However, for local companies to participate, there is a need for well thought out strategies emphasizing relevant skills development and knowledge transfer. How prepared do you think we are for this, and how do we transform these policies into action?
Brenda, it begins with visibility of demand, access to information. What you need to first of all recall is that when the industries did a market analysis or an industry baseline survey in 2013, which actually came out in 2014, one of the biggest problems or issues or encumbrances for the businesses to get involved in the oil and gas sector was visibility of a demand. Now, the companies, the IOCs and the other companies are obliged, or they are tasked by the Petroleum Authority and the other entities to provide or perform what they call supplier development conferences. And these are done quarterly. And in these conferences, or in these conferences or workshops, you have information that is shared with the local businesses to support them in preparation. Remember one thing, Brenda. It's a very capital-intensive sector. That's the oil and gas sector. And on top of that, it's also very time-bound. Businesses have to get themselves ready, but they can only get themselves ready by getting the right information from the companies and the government or the government entities, which has actually been happening. Now, yes, it is true we've had a lag. And just because of that lag, many businesses decided to relax. As a matter of fact, this signing of the several agreements over the last few days has actually caused what I would imagine as a stampede, because now many businesses are now running like headless chicken trying to get involved in the oil and gas sector again. But you see, it's all about information. And this information has to come from all sources. That's the best way that guys can prepare themselves. Without information, it makes it very difficult to actually explore or navigate the sector. And I think, in all honesty, you have a website that is run by the Petroleum Authority, which has several contracts that are being advertised by the companies, but also creates an easy process for the businesses to be involved in the sector. Let's also remember that for you to be involved in the oil and gas sector, for you to provide a good or service, you have to be on what we call the National Supplier Database. To get onto this database is a very easy thing. It's all about your URSP certificate, Uganda Registration Services Bureau certificate, your Uganda Revenue Certificate of Compliance, your National Social Security Fund Certificate of Compliance, and a letter from your bank. But how many businesses are compliant today? How many businesses have been paying their taxes to be compliant and get that health card from URA? How many businesses are actually paying Social Security for their employees to get that health certificate from NSSF? So all of these things are things that now the businesses have to start running around and start working on them as a way of getting involved. Otherwise, it's going to be very difficult for many local businesses to be involved. But there's an opportunity here and it's easy. One of the first steps that the government has already taken is that we have relevant laws and regulations in this space to then operationalize the policy. And what do I mean by this? We have specific provisions that encourage use of local resources, they encourage use of local expertise, they encourage skills transfer, they encourage technology transfer. So already we have a framework which is very, very robust, and it is clear that it has been thought through to support Ugandans. It then takes us to what Tony is saying, that it's then how you implement these things. It's good to have them on paper, but the implementation then also really, really matters. And that support is already there. Like Tony has claimed, we are seeing initiatives by the Petroleum Authority and others that are looking to make sure that whatever they have put on paper is now being actually implemented, and the locals are being supported to achieve that. They have also ring-fenced certain sectors for Ugandan businesses. So you have the ability, or what I would call actually the low-hanging fruits for Ugandans to get involved in: civil works, construction, hospitality, camp services, transport logistics, all the way to waste management and the rest. These are great areas for local businesses to be involved in.
From the press surrounding the pipeline project, we are being told that the oil and gas industry has the potential and is positioned to double Uganda's GDP within 3 years. How do you anticipate that this will trickle down to the economy, or has it already trickled down? And how do you think this is going to transform individual Ugandan lives? We have, to some extent, felt the trickle-down effect of the oil and gas developments, especially about 5 years ago when exploration was at its peak. We had all these oil companies very busy doing exploration. We had the service providers, the likes of Baker Hughes and Schlumberger here, and all that was one, income to Uganda, but also, some involvement by a number of Ugandans and Ugandan companies in that space. But that said, we are now looking at even a bigger opportunity ahead of us. So the pipeline alone, we're talking about $3.5 billion worth of investment. And, I've seen people argue on social media that a big chunk of this is actually going to end up elsewhere, not with Uganda. So did we get a raw deal? And I would say it is how you look at it. Either make other developments and opportunities that will arise from this. Oil field developments that are happening and the related infrastructure, the industrial park. We have a network of feeder pipes. We have proposed gas power plants. Now, when you think about all those things, this is over 10 billion of investment, maybe over the next 3 to 5 years. Uganda in particular is estimated likely to tap about 5 billion of that. Looking at those numbers, there's certainly things that we can do as Uganda to make sure that we tap into that 5 billion that should be retained within the country. From a job perspective, what are we doing? Because we expect that over 100,000 or 100,000, 150,000 jobs will be created in this entire process. Are Ugandans ready? So the opportunities are there. They have a big potential.
for improving and growing our economy. It's just a matter of our preparedness to tap into them.
During the exploration and appraisal phase, so much money was made. You had close to $5 billion that was thrown into our economy. What is shocking, though, is that a huge chunk of this, if not more than 70% of this opportunity, was actually taken out of the country. I would imagine we need to do this time around is maximize on in-country value. And now that is where the conversation on local content comes into play. Because you see, if we ignore our conversations of local content or conversations on local content, we are then limiting the kind of value that can be noticeable in our economy or in the country. So I think for me, in connection to what Pamela has said is we now need to go back to the information sharing, preparedness of the businesses, getting the businesses to understand what it takes to be involved in the oil and gas sector. That is the best way we can have a trickle-down effect of, this whole oil and gas story in the economy or to the Muntu Awansi or the down person. But also another thing that I want to emphasize is as we emphasize the need for local content and promote it and push it, it is also important for the local businesses to understand that it's not going to be business as usual. The need for them to comply to standards, the need for them to improve on how they do their business, the need for them to understand what it takes to be active in the oil and gas sector is going to be very important. Let's understand that you're going to have close to 13,000 to 15,000 directly employed workers in one geographical location, which is the Albertine. On top of that, you're going to have about 35,000, 40,000 indirect employees. And then, of course, you have the reduced to about 100,000 or more. Now, as a country, we talk about being very agricultural. We have a lot of arable land and so on and so forth. But as we speak today, we signed FID today and operations began next week. Uganda as a country would struggle on providing food that is of quality standards that can actually support the operations in the camps. That is one. But also two, this is not an issue that I think, in my opinion, should be a problem. I think what is the problem right now is that we do not understand, or the farmers do not understand what is necessitated. Back to the services, it's very possible to get businesses ready in a short time. I have stories of companies that I knew while I was at Total E&P as National Content Manager. They've been through the Stanbic Business Incubator that I support or head, and they've been able to become credible businesses, articulate how they manage their operations, and so on and so forth. The same companies are already providing work within the oil and gas sector. And all of this has been happening or has happened in less than 18 months. So it is definitely possible for the companies to be ready. But truth be told, I'll be damned if I lie that we're ready. We are not. I think now more than ever, we need to get businesses ready to understand the need to get ready to operate within the oil and gas sector.
This sector is very specialized. So what do you think are the realistic opportunities for Ugandan companies, and how can Ugandan businesses position themselves to take advantage of the undeniable benefit that this sector is going to bring to the Ugandan economy?
Some of these companies, they have certain specialist skills that even if Ugandans wanted to be part of it, we probably don't have those skills. You may not be able to provide the oil rigs or have expertise to run them. There are certain things really that we would not say we can participate in as Ugandans. But that said, we still have opportunities to subcontract or enter into joint ventures for opportunities where we are able to apply ourselves. And when you think about that list of ring-fenced services, I can see that someone put in some time to think about what are some of the things that Ugandans can comfortably do at the moment as they acquire skills. Things like civil work, things like the hospitality space, even transport and waste management to an extent possible, camp management. Those are all things that Ugandans can do. It is important that we then start to think about, if we don't have the required capacity financially, but also from a technical perspective, who are the people that we can partner with? We can then initially work with them, learn from them, they transfer their skills and expertise, and then maybe in the medium to long term, we're able to fully take part in some of these services. So I see it as a journey where we need to start by acknowledging where our gaps are. Once we acknowledge those gaps, we identify partners or players that we would like to partner with. We learn from them as we develop ourselves. Like Tony said, we still have a bit of work to do on ourselves as Ugandans. Much as a lot has been put in, there's still a lot to be done.
Yeah, and Pamela rightly said, when you think about the oil and gas sector, it's a very new thing in Uganda or even East Africa. You won't really find Ugandan entities that are doing oil field equipment manufacturing, drilling services, drilling supplies, cement additives, oil field chemicals. These are specialist areas that we know the big boys, Schlumberger, Halliburton, Baker Hughes, and the rest can run. But for the Ugandans, there's a huge opportunity in areas where they can actually perform far better than any international firm. For instance, food supply, domestic airline services, production operation services, generic waste management, manpower agency services, transportation, road construction, civil construction services, fuel wholesale or work safety products provision. These are areas where Ugandans can actually tap in. Let's just put aside the highly capital-intensive areas or services and really focus on where the quick wins are. As we focus on understanding the sector more, we can then start now doing what the big boys are doing. It would be very interesting to see Ugandans in 10 years from now actually managing drilling operations like it is in Nigeria. Because in Nigeria, you have entities now, local companies, local individuals who are running oil fields. That's the story we want to see. But for now, our capacity is very limited to those very specialist areas.
As Ugandans, yes, we may have the excitement. We want to be part of each and everything. But clearly, we also need to do our part and get ready ourselves. Indeed, in the medium to long term, if we as Ugandans are serious and we are having the right partnerships, we will definitely get there in terms of starting to compete with the big boys or the so-called big boys.
I am curious about your take on fiscal management of the oil revenues. So what are your views on Uganda being able to have the discipline to manage a large influx of oil revenues? Is there a plan to invest these revenues for the future generations?
That's a very interesting question, and I need to make sure that I answer it in a politically correct way without putting the specific people on the spot. But I'll put it this way. I think discipline with regard to revenue management is a principle that should be applied whether you are in scarcity or in abundance. If we have no discipline with limited resources, then we cannot expect to have discipline with larger resources. And the reverse is true. One thing that I know for a fact is that the government has been aware of the potential challenges that could arise in the oil and gas space. And a number of steps or certain steps have been taken in terms of trying to address those potential challenges. We have, as part of the regulatory framework, while we were putting in place the petroleum legislation, there was a Public Finance Management Act that was put in place, which provides how the finances or the public funds should be managed, and particularly is relevant for the oil and gas sector. So there has been regulation that has been put in place. Secondly, I think it was late 2020 when Uganda took a significant step of enrolling onto the Extractive Industries Transparency Initiative, the EITI, that's what it's called. It's an initiative that drives transparency or promotes transparency and accountable management of natural resources for extractive industries. A number of countries are members to this, and Uganda signed up last year. I think it was around August. With that, it shows you that we want to do things right. We want to make sure we are not caught on the wrong side. We have done benchmarks with Norway, Ghana, and other countries just to say how are they doing it and how can we avoid the so-called oil curse in Uganda. There's already things that have been done. Does that mean that we will get it right? That will depend on how we then work it out in practice. If we're going to say we want to be transparent, then we have to walk the talk. Our legislation is as good as its implementation. So if we don't implement what we have committed to doing, then we will struggle to be able to make use of these tax revenues. The government is very keen on making sure that this oil is not an end in itself. Revenues that we tap from the oil and the rest of the sectors of the economy still remain critical. Tony talked about the agriculture sector earlier. We still continue to see interest from the perspective of making sure that there is value addition in the agriculture sector, so that it's a sector that can grow, that can be more sustainable than it currently is. So there's a plan to develop the agriculture sector. There's a plan to invest in our other minerals. Uganda is a very resource-rich country. We are looking at how can we make sure that we formalize that sector. It's again going back to, are we able to receive these revenues, plan for them, make sure we are accountable and are able to save for the rest of the sectors of the economy.
So I'd like to shift a bit to the tariff. My understanding from the press releases is that this tariff is going to be fixed at about $13 a barrel. Since we have not had sight of the relevant agreement, is the communication from government that this is going to be a fixed tariff for the life of oil production? And do you think that this tariff is going to be commercially viable in the long run? This is assuming that oil prices keep fluctuating and also considering that there's a push for alternative sources of energy.
That's an interesting question. I am not privy to the specific contents of the agreements, but I have read what has been published in local media, the press statement that the minister issued following the signature of the agreements. And it is clear that this is a fixed tariff that we are looking at. In terms of the period over which it will apply, whether that is going to be for the entire life of production, that has not been put clearly in the reports that I have come across. But that said, I have also seen comments, interesting comments on social media with concerns from a number of Ugandans and other stakeholders around how wide do we fix the tariff? And what does that mean for us as a country? What if the oil prices drop? Aren't we going to end up in a lost position? So there's been all these concerns going around on social media, and rightly so. But from my personal perspective, I think we need to look at this from a holistic point of view. And by this, I mean that while the pipeline is a critical part of the life of this oil, there are additional opportunities to think about, and we've talked about some of them. So the pipeline is one thing, but it does come with this spillover effect. But also one of the things that I know is a priority to government is to make sure that we build our own refineries so that we are not just exporting crude oil, but at some point, once the crude oil pipeline is in place and running, then we are looking at investing in a refinery. So I guess we have to find a balance between how much oil we are able to export as crude oil, how much oil can we then retain in Uganda, add value to it through the refinery, and then sell it as a finished product. Are we then able to balance any potential losses or potential future shortfalls that could arise from the pipeline in the event that the crude oil pipeline prices drop, and we are able to make up for that through the refined products that we will generate? So for me, I think we cannot conclusively respond to this question on the basis of only what the pipeline offers, because I believe there's need to step back and look at the holistic picture. There's need to do some financial modeling and think about when we do refine our products, how much can we get out of there, and how do we guard against such potential risks in the future?
Thank you, Tony and Pamela, for your insights on the readiness of Ugandan government players in light of the signing of some of the East African crude oil pipeline agreements. Thank you also for letting all our listeners know how the private sector can position itself to take advantage of this development. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Brenda. Thank you.
Thank you, Brenda. Much appreciated.
Thank you for listening to Viewpoints with Brenda. To keep the conversation going, follow us on Instagram at Viewpoints by BN and follow me on Twitter at Kasabiti. That's KASABIITI. To hear more conversations like this, follow the podcast, subscribe, like, and feel free to leave us a rating. See you next time.